Ami first, but I know he will talk to you about part of his story. We know each other through the Aspen Institute program. He used to work for the Israeli government, is a serial entrepreneur, and has started this company called Leap Learner that teaches coding online, which my son and I are learning from. We're learning Python together, which is great. Let's welcome Ami, followed by Inor for this conversation, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ami. I'm from Israel, and and thank you for being here. I'll start with the self-introduction, I guess. So, I started my career actually in the Israeli Secret Service in the worst timing ever. A day before I started my job, our prime minister was murdered. And I found myself as a part of a very small group of people after Prime Minister Rabin was murdered, going into the Secret Service. And going into the Secret Service in the worst failure of its history was kind of very interesting. But the situation brought me to be the head of security for our prime minister, for our president, for many world presidents that you can imagine, when I was only 23 years old. Normally it's something that you'll do much later in your life. And it really changed my perspective about life. So after a couple of years in the Israeli Secret Service, I was, to be honest, a little bored. And I became a diplomat. I was the Israeli consul in France and in Ireland. Did it for a couple of years, and I was still bored. And after being bored twice, I said, okay, maybe you should move to the private sector. So I started a company called Expand. And Expand invented the concept of 3D cinema. So if any of you ever watched, especially in China, if you ever watched a 3D movie, so a movie with glasses on your face, it's because of me. Well, not only because of me, but I contributed quite a lot to it. So anything from Avatar to Pirates of the Caribbean, and even if you're in the Queen of England or not, they all use our technology. And it was an amazing race, starting a company with one co-founder, totally failing for 2 years. And then in 2 years, the entire world changed. And everybody started to watch 3D movies. And then we did another company of 3D television and a medical devices company and a couple of failures in the process, of course. And I got back to Israel and I said, well, I need to do something else. So the next company that I started is actually an investment company. But I wanted it to be a very special company. So it's the only investment company that is owned by Israelis and Palestinians. So I am Jewish, Israeli, my co-founder, Forsan, is Muslim, Palestinian, and we invest in companies that have Palestinian and Israeli founders. We said, why only invest? And by the way, that's also my Aspen project. And I said, we should do something more meaningful than that. And then I was exposed to China in a very interesting way for the first time. Why? When we started the fund, we were 100% sure that most of our investors will be Americans. But guess what? They were Chinese. One of the founders of Alibaba, one of the founders of Tencent, and I remember asking them, why do you invest in Israeli-Palestinian investment fund? I said, because we like you guys. We really like what you're doing. And I got to know China very well, and a lot of those guys came to Israel, and they traveled with me. And one day I was traveling in Israel with a CEO of a very big company here in China, and she told me, Ami, you should really teach kids in China how to be innovative. I said, why? And she said, well, there is a need. I said, I didn't really understand what is the need at the time. And I told her, but I actually always wanted to start a company that will teach kids how to code, programming, because as a child I learned programming, and it's very important. And she said, well, come to China, I'll help you. So I packed my things and moved to China with my 3 kids and my wife, and landed in Shanghai, met Aaron, my co-founder, and started a company called Leap Learner that I will tell you later about it. But when I got into China, another request was, can you tell us a little bit about Israeli and Jewish innovation? How does it work? So we started to write a book. It took about 2 years to write this book, and we are all here today because of this book that was published about a month ago. So now let's let's talk a little bit about Israel. Israel is by far the most innovative country in the world, by far, definitely per capita. And Jewish people, if you look at them, they won the Nobel Prize 100 to 1 compared to any other population in the world. 22% of the Nobel winners in the world are from Jewish origin. Jewish people are only 0.2% of the world population. And you should ask yourself, how does it work? On the same time, put into the context that Jewish people were hunted for thousands of years, at least for the last 2,000 years, and especially if you look at the Holocaust, when the Nazis killed 6 million Jewish people, including, by the way, the family of my father. Only my father survived from his entire family. And you ask yourself, like, how does it work? Like, why a nation that have been to such dire strait is so innovative? If you look at Israel, we are surrounded by enemies. We have no natural resources. We don't have water. We have a tiny piece of land, and everybody around us wants to kill us. And still, it's so innovative. And the question is, why? How does it work? So, in the book, we're trying to talk about innovation. And the first mistake that I noticed when I spoke with people in China specifically is people in China tend to confuse problem solving with innovation. And it's totally not the same thing. It's almost the reverse. And I'll try to explain you actually with an example. So in Israel, we have a problem. At the north, we have water, but we don't have land. In the south, we have land, and we don't have water. Problem. How do you solve? We dig in the 60s a very big canal from the north to the south. Fantastic. Problem solved, right? But one farmer wakes up in the middle of the desert, and he noticed that next to his tiny house, there is a beautiful green tree. And he asked himself, how come there is a green tree in the middle of the desert? So he's going and checking around, and he suddenly sees that there is a water pipe there, and there is a tiny, tiny hole in the water pipe. Like a tiny drop of water. Saying, wow, it's from these tiny drops that you can see there. This is enough in order to actually grow a giant tree? So he said, he takes a long pipe, make tiny holes in the pipe, and put next to every hole a tree. And guess what? It's growing. This guy invented the draping system. The draping system changed agriculture in China, in India, in Africa, in the Middle East, all around the world, because suddenly we can use about 10% of the amount of water to grow the same amount of fruits and vegetables. This guy was not trying to solve a problem. Not at all. He was not even trying to innovate. He was curious. He had passion, and the result was innovation. It didn't come from the need to solve a problem. And then I want to explain something about the book. The book is actually very easy reading. It's not very academic. You can probably read it in an hour and a half. But it's full of practical advices for parents. That was the logic behind it. And then when I meet parents, and I'm giving this lecture to many parents in China, and mainly in schools, they ask us, what's the connection to us? What do you want us to do? And the first example that I'm always giving them is, what are you giving to your kids for breakfast? And especially when you ask the kids, all the kids are having the same breakfast every day in China. It's almost, you can say that you're not doing it, but trust me, most of the parents are doing it because it's easy and it's efficient, right? So then I started a challenge. I said to them, you know what? There is a challenge. For the next 30 days, I want you every day to make a different breakfast for your kid. Say, why? And I said, it's very simple. If you create an environment of instability, of changes all the time, of creativity, this is how you drive innovation. And as a result, what you can see here on the screen, every day when I'm waking up now, I get about 50, 60 pictures of breakfast from all over China. And people are trying to challenge it. Now, if you want to create an innovative environment in your house, you want to take all the routines that you have, the breakfast, the dinner, the shower, everything, and challenge yourself and your children to make it differently every day. It's hard, by the way, because your son might wake up and say, oh, you know, I want a pirate ship for breakfast. That's a lot of work as a parent, but that's the only way you can actually use the routine in order to create innovation. So I'll try to give you some more examples from the book, which are very relevant for China. Self-learning. I have 3 children. Never, ever, ever in my life, I helped them to do homework. Not even once. They never had a private tutor in their life. not even once. And guess what? They will never have. And I don't plan to ever help them to make homework. By the way, my parents never helped me. And in Israel, it's very common. Why? This muscle of self-learning, despite the fact that it's actually not efficient, develops passion, develops interest, and allows you to find your personal identity. And I know that in China, it's science fiction. I know it's impossible to be a child in China and to learn all alone and never to have a private tutor. But what you can do in China, you can allow your kids sometime, even if it's half an hour a day, force them to do the homework alone and try it. It will be hard because they are used to have help, but you can definitely do it. The second thing, which is extremely common in Israel, it's self-not learning. This is one of the hardest problems in China. All your children are busy from the moment they open their eyes to the moment they go to sleep, 7 days a week. When you do that, you are destroying their innovation. I have nothing else to tell you. Like my kids, they have so much free time, you have no idea. And again, I understand the problem in China. So the recommendation here is, as you know, companies like Google and Facebook and Tencent and Alibaba, they have the genius hour. They require their employees to spend about 10% of things of their own interest. You should do the same thing with your kids. Pick up 1 hour a day, half an hour a day. It doesn't really matter. And tell them, now you should do whatever you want. And it'll be shocking for the kids. What do you mean whatever you want? Just whatever you want. This concept of not being busy allows you to discover yourself. And if you don't know how to discover yourself when you're 8 years old, when you're 21 or 22, and you graduate from Yale, you'll probably not know what your passion. You must know your passion, and for this you need the time alone. The last one is let your children lead. If you remember the example of the breakfast, I don't expect you to be creative and decide what's the breakfast. I expect you to challenge your children every evening and say, hey, what you want for breakfast tomorrow? And the children will say, oh, I want whatever. Say, no, it needs to be different. You need to come with the idea. This concept of leading, which is extremely strong in Israel, is very hard to kids in China because they are getting instructions all the time, what they need to do. Another example is that, again, a very famous CEO of a very big company traveled with me in Israel one time. We traveled in the Israeli desert. I had my 3 kids. He had his son. We traveled to the desert. We get out of the car. There is a big mountain. And I'm telling to my kids, see you at top of the mountain. And he goes, are you crazy? It's like, something might happen for them. They will fall. I said, no, they will be fine. They will be fine. Don't worry. And the child that he had is holding his mother and father. And he was literally afraid to make mistake and to fall. If you don't allow your children to lead in any way, they will not become leaders. Guess what? And it starts in a very early age. And how do you do it? With a tiny task that they need to do every day. It's possible. Now I want to teach you some Hebrew. Those are my kids. And this word is balagan. Balagan is chaos. It's one of the first words that you learn in Israel. You land in Israel, you see that everything is a chaos. Why chaos is so important? By the way, the meaning of balagan is chaos in the positive way, not in a negative way. So this is my son after eating half of the beach, my daughter, whatever, and this is my other daughter's room. This is totally normal. When I show those pictures to Israelis, they say, okay, what's big deal? Why do you even put it on the presentation? I know that for Chinese parents it's kind of crazy. Why it's so important? In order to have innovation, you need to reduce the amount of stability, as we said before. And part of the stability is if your child is just touching the ground and 2 AIs are jumping on them in order to clean their face that they will be clean, you're actually forcing them into an environment that's pre-organized and they don't have creativity. My daughter, Shishi, that's her room, she's actually the most organized child I know on the planet. You know what she does? Every month, she takes everything she has, she create a pile like this in the middle of the room, and she redesigns her room. Every month. Then the room looks amazing. You really need to create instability some places when they are not organized, when they are not forced to you, in order to have this spirit of innovation, creativity, something new, something fresh. And it's critical to do it. languages, one of my favorite subjects. Every child in Israel speaks 4 languages. You're saying, oh, even when I say to Israeli, they're saying, what? No, 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 we don't speak four languages. They do. We speak Hebrew, our mother language. We speak English because we just need to. We learn the second language, can be Chinese, Spanish, French, whatever. And every child in Israel learns how to code. We made coding education mandatory in 1995. We made coding education mandatory for primary schools 6 years ago. Coding is the language of artificial intelligence. And when people think that knowing coding is only if you want to be a software engineer, you totally misunderstand the concept. We teach with Leap Learner thousands of kids, tens of thousands of kids how to code in China. We don't want them to be developers. We don't. The idea of learning coding is not to be a software engineer, not at all. In the future, you have to understand that coding is the language of artificial intelligence. It's the language that allows you to communicate with technology. And if you don't do it, you will not survive in your future. I'll give you an example. Right now, there are computers that know how to write contracts, legal contracts, better than lawyers. Then you have 2 lawyers. One lawyer knows how to use artificial intelligence, another doesn't know how to use artificial intelligence. Who do you think will be the lawyer that will survive if there are robots that know how to do it? So whether you want to be an artist, a chef, a musician, anything you want to do, you need to know the language of artificial intelligence. And this is one of the hardest parts for parents today because they didn't know it. This computer is the first computer that I had. When I was 10 years old, my mother heard that there is something called a computer. My mother didn't know anything about computers, but she heard that this device called a computer will change the world. So she took a huge loan for her, and she bought me a computer. The smartest thing that my mother understood, and it's very Jewish and it's very Israeli, that the most important thing that your kids need to learn is the thing that you as a parent don't understand. It's very easy to teach them the thing that you understand. But that's not what they will need for the future. So what my mother understood 36 years ago totally changed my life. And I actually highly recommend that every child in the world, by the way, will speak the language of artificial intelligence, not in order to be a software engineer, not at all. It's simply a survival skill. Hutzpah. Hutzpah is another very famous Jewish word. And actually, if you want your kids ever to have a chance to win a Nobel Prize or to be exceptional, pay attention to this presentation. Chutzpah is rudeness, aggressiveness, boldness to your superiors in a very polite way. It doesn't make sense, but I'll try maybe to give you the explanation with an example. When I started Leap Learner in China, I remember our first meeting. I was with my Aaron, with my co-founders, and about 8 other people in the room. And I'm the CEO, and I'm telling them, okay, we need to do a website, we need to do this, and we need to do that. And I gave them a list of like 5 different things that they need to do. And they just stood up, they left the room, and they did exactly what I told them. I was so disappointed. So disappointed. You have to understand, if I'll give instructions to my team in Israel, nobody will do what I tell them. No one. They will ask me, why? Why should we do this? Maybe we should do this before we do that. They will fight with me on everything. They will have chutzpah. They will see me as the boss, but they will understand that in order to respect me, they need to challenge me. Now, why you cannot win a Nobel Prize? If your professor is the best mathematician in the world, and you don't prove that this professor is wrong, how can you win a Nobel Prize? How can you be exceptional? So in Israel, we practice this concept of not respecting authority to the highest level in the most polite way. The kids don't respect me. They will challenge me on everything. My teachers, my professors, even the generals in the army, they want you to challenge them. And this is, parents, by the way, you need to enforce it because a child cannot have chutzpah. Only the parents can allow it. So if your child is challenging you and you say, you do what I told you, You do it 5 times, that's it. The child just execute orders, right? I never, ever, ever in my life told my kids, you do it because I'm your dad. Never. I will always have a discussion with them because I want to encourage it. And you as parents, you need to do the same thing. If your child is actually doing what you told them, ask them, why are you doing what I told you? I know it sounds stupid, but think about it. You challenge them once, you create this chutzpah, you create this muscle. And this muscle is extremely critical for your child. Probably if you need to take one thing from the book, that will be it. It's hard, but it's important. Risk. Taking risk. So about 10 hours ago, Israel tried to land on the moon. Israel was trying, it's the 6th country to actually get to the orbit of the moon, and we were supposed to be the 4th country to land on the moon. Our spaceship crashed. We got to like about 5 kilometers from the moon, and then one of the engines collapsed, and we crashed into the moon. This idea of flying to the moon is the first private mission to the moon. So it started with 3 people, 3 students. They say, hey, let's fly a spaceship to the moon. And they convinced people to do it. The entire project cost $100 million compared to the previous one, which cost $100 billion. Just to understand how much innovation they had to do. And they failed. They crashed. Those people in Israel are superheroes. They're superheroes despite the fact that they failed, because we love the concept of failing. And in order to fail, you have to take risks. So I'll try to explain it with the example from my army service. So when I started my army service, I did the pilot training. So I was flying jets. And I remember the first time we take off, we sit in a room like this, actually very similar, and every pilot goes on the plane, and you fly to point A, you do something, fly to point B, do something, and then you come back to the base, everybody comes back to the room, and then the head of the unit goes, okay, who did the mission right? And you know, like, I don't know, 20% raise their hands and saying, yeah, we did it perfectly. And he goes, okay, you're totally not interested. We don't want to hear anything from you. Who failed? All the other people raise their hand. And then every person will come on the stage and they will say why they failed, how they failed, why they learned, what did they learn, and how they will not fail next time. Why this process is so important. The people that fail are actually the better pilots. Because the people that didn't fail are not trying hard enough. So if you're always good, you always get it right, you're always perfect, it means that you're actually not trying hard enough. Those guys that sent a spaceship to the moon will never send a spaceship to the moon if they think they will not fail. They didn't have any chance from the beginning. But those people that fail and learn from their failures again and again and again and again, they become eventually the exceptional. And this is why taking risk is so important. A lot of people that hear this presentation, especially if they were educated in the US, they say, oh, this is very similar to American education. No, it's not. American education hate taking risk. They hate it. This is very, very Israeli. This chutzpah, this balagan, this boldness is not American. It's the opposite. And this level of taking risk, the ability to become a hero because you failed, is extremely unique to Israel. And you need to encourage your kids to fail and try, to fail and try. If your child failed doing something, and you say, don't do that again because you failed, you kill their ability to take risk. You just kill it. If your child failed, ask them, why? What can we do differently next time? You need to really treat them with respect. This is my last slide, so you're almost on. When I started Leap Learner with Aaron, this became the motto of the company, and this is, for me, is the secret for innovation. Never ask what to do, always ask why I do it. It's extremely important. Most of the kids right now, and most of the employees right now, they ask, okay, what's my job? What should I do? Give me the plan, and I will do it. They never ask, why am I doing it? And you have to understand, it's much harder. And again, I'll try to give you an example. Maybe it will be easier to understand. So my son, Gilly, is 7 years old now, right? Every time in the evening before he goes to the shower, we have the same routine. Gilly, go to the shower. And he goes, why? I say, well, Gilly, if you'll not go to the shower, you'll be dirty. And he says, okay, what's the problem of being dirty? Why I cannot be dirty? And I say, well, Gilly, if you'll be dirty, you might get sick. So, oh, what's the problem of getting sick? I'm fine being sick. And so, well, Gilly, if you'll be sick, you'll not go to school. So, oh, that's fantastic. I want, it's even better. I want to stay at home. And then he said, well, Gilly, if you'll go to school, if you'll not go to school, maybe you will not be able to do the fun things that you're doing after that, etc., etc., etc. Now, sometimes I'm spending 20 minutes having why discussion. By the way, when he does something bad, I will also have the same thing, questioning in the reverse way. But when you do it, then they will not fight with you again. Because this process mentally is so hard for children to actually confront and going into this process. They will say, eventually, I'll just go and have a shower. And you really need to encourage your kids to ask why. This idea of authority, I'm adult, therefore you have to do what I'm telling you. I'm the CEO, therefore you have to do what I'm telling you, doesn't work. It kills innovation. You need to spend time, and don't be afraid to do it, because when you spend the time on this, you can actually get it done. And there's lots of stuff in the book. We will do actually questions and answers in the end, I guess, right? So you have like my QR code if you want to, whatever, ask questions, send pictures of your breakfast, etc. But I'm sure we'll do like proper Q&A in the end. So don't be afraid to go down, to let your children lead. It's hard. It's very, very, very hard. But you can do it. And I will end with one example. I think it's very important. Actually, it's one of the readings of Aspen. Chutzpah is actually part of the Chinese DNA. If you look back on Mencius, he was debating with kings. The entire writing, they are all about a debate with a king. Should I do that or should I not do that? It's something that when you're trying to be too efficient, you lose. Your parents and grandparents had more chutzpah in them. You are becoming smarter and smarter, but you're losing the chutzpah. So I'm actually encouraging you to challenge, to allow your kids to challenge you, to allow your bosses to challenge you. And you as leaders, especially who you are, you have to start this concept of encouraging people to have chutzpah. Thank you. You're next.